we're coming on the air tonight. We're watching news in two major trials happening, right? Trials that are at the center of these national conversations over race, politics, guns, protests, all of it. Because at any point, we could get a verdict in the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. He's facing life in prison, for killing two protesters during racial justice demonstrations last summer. We'll talk about what the jury's question to the judge today could mean. And then in Georgia, one of the men who killed 25-year-old black jogger Ahmaud Arbery says it's time for his side of the story in testimony that's surprising even some legal experts. We're going to take you there. We're also covering COVID with boosters for everybody, question mark. We could see that maybe by the end of the week. Authorization for at least one booster for adults. The interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci you will only see here. And with the flu and winter twindemic are legit. And the pandemic, by the way, not easy for anyone, and definitely not for those healthcare workers on the front lines. So we're headed to the middle of the woods in North Carolina to show you how some of them are getting help at what we've come to call Burnout Camp. Plus, a story we broke first on NBC News on why the Department of Education is investigating complaints of racism at one Texas school district. Our reporter who scooped that story will have the backstory for us later on. And check out the mess for people who live in the Northwest after some ridiculously bad weather rolled through, and the forecast calling for more on the way just in time for Thanksgiving. But is a storm freak out a week out really warranted? We've got Al Roker with the gut check coming up. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now we're looking at those trials at the heart of much of what we've been talking about in this country for more than a year. The reckoning over race and guns and justice. Trials and cases where lives were lost and the killers face a ton of questions now. And we could get a verdict in one of them really any minute, any day. That's in Wisconsin, where Kyle Rittenhouse is waiting to learn whether he will spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. But there's also news out of that trial down south in Georgia. But I want to get to Ron Allen, who's here with us from Brunswick, Georgia now. And Ron, we just heard from Travis McMichael talking about the moment he killed Ahmaud Arbery. I want to play for folks what he had to say. Watch.
A shot.
That may be their calculation.
Ron Allen, live for us there in Brunswick, Georgia. Ron, it's great to have you on the show starting us off tonight. Thank you so much. We told you we'd take you to Kenosha, so let's do that now. It's where we find NBC News Now anchor Tom Yamas, who's wearing his correspondent hat for us covering this trial tonight. So, Tom, we saw today, right, the jury coming out wanting to know how and where they can look at some of them tonight on Top Story a little bit later on. As we were getting the show ready to go tonight, some other news dropped in from Moderna, which now wants emergency adults. Pfizer, has already asked for the green light for theirs, and that could come maybe by the end of the week. Health experts are out there saying, hey, do not.
Has the idea that, what really matters about the way you talk about violence, about the way you depict it. Gosar and his allies in the Republican Party say, look, this is a video. It's goofy. It's kind of ridiculous if you watch the whole thing. The whole thing's just absurd. It happened in more than a decade. So
right.
Yeah, I think the speed kind of caught me, at least, a little by surprise.
Garrett, hey, great to have you with us. Thank you for being here. I know this has all just developed in the last hour, so appreciate it. Political violence has been something the January 6th committee has been investigating after the insurrection at the Capitol. Garrett mentioned it. And now we found out Steve Bannon is pleading not guilty. Today's move is going to make the process more efficient. We've got more coming up after a quick commercial break. The Louisiana inmate, whose name is quite literally on the Supreme Court case opening the door for juveniles to get a second chance if they commit a crime. But he himself has not had a second chance until today. Nobody knows this case better than Lester Holt, and he'll be with us with the news on Henry Montgomery next. So here's what went down today. One of the most closely watched parole hearings in a long time for a man named Henry Montgomery, who was just 17 years old when he was convicted of shooting and killing a sheriff's deputy back in 1963 and was sentenced. We're so glad to have you with us to report it out here tonight. Thank you, Lester. Appreciate it.
You get it.
More, of course, from Lester tonight on NBC Nightly News. Coming up here on this show, one judge calling him the epitome of the January 6th riot. I'm talking about this guy. You probably recognize him. The so-called QAnon shaman who's just been sentenced to prison, plus some upsetting news on overdose deaths in this country. Dr. Natalie Azar joins me next with some context on why they seem to be skyrocketing. A court is forcing the White House to sell land in the Gulf to drill oil, and some say that's going to create more problems for the environment. Things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number one, Jacob Chansley, who you probably recognize as the so-called QAnon shaman. That's him. He was sentenced to 41 months in federal prison because of what he did during the Capitol riot. Stuff like this, selfies on the Senate floor, ignoring police, etc. He pleaded guilty in September to felony obstruction of an official proceeding. Number two, something we'll also cover tomorrow. Two men convicted of assassinating Malcolm X may be exonerated. That's after an investigation found certain key evidence was not to end her 13-year-long conservatorship. She said she is really appreciative of that hashtag Free Britney movement. So this week, it's supposed to be this time for President Biden to be making this sales pitch, right? Selling that infrastructure plan after months of delay. He's actually in Michigan right now doing that very thing. So listen, it's not news to say that this past year and a half has been tough on everyone, but that especially includes frontline workers to try to find their center, to try to find some calm. Burnout camp. You're going to come with me in just a minute. But first, NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. We'll start with news out of our Midwest bureau, where a pilot is dead after what was supposed to be a historic flight. The plane was meant to help fight the Kruger Rock Fire by Estes Park in Colorado. It's only 15% contained. This would have been the first time a fixed-wing plane fought a fire at night using night vision in that state. From our LA bureau, the Staples Center, have you heard this, getting a new name starting Christmas Day? You're going to call it Crypto.com Arena, and we're going to see an updated logo as part of a story you'll find here and not anywhere else. And this week, it is Cost of Care Week across our NBC News platforms, where we're looking at the effect the pandemic is having on people who care for others, and that absolutely includes healthcare workers. And listen, almost 500,000 of them have left the profession since February. Back with updates on that. Appreciate you. Appreciate all you for watching our first night, launch night of Hallie Jackson Now. We're going to have more for you tomorrow. Same time, same place. We'll see you then. But for now, more coverage after the break.